All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second to last unit in the course. Remember, your final papers are due shortly. All right, so last week we discussed radicalization and de-radicalization. So related to that is failure of terrorist organizations. So this week we're going to be discussing some research articles that focused on what contributes to the demise of terrorist organizations. There are 4 readings this week, and each one presents a little bit different perspective on the topic. So the first I'll discuss is by Gabulev and Sandler. They examined 586 terrorist groups that existed between 1970 and 2007. Now, not all these groups persisted for the entire time, but each group, including the study, persisted at some point during that time span. The average length of time that a group persisted was about 10 years. 26% of the groups did not last 1 year, and about 68% of the groups existed for 10 years or less. The average duration of groups that survived more than 1 year was 13 years. So they looked at a variety of variables to determine what impacted a group's ability to exist in any year. They found that larger terrorist groups were less likely to die. Religious fundamentalist groups were less likely to die than other types of groups. And if a terrorist group possessed multiple home bases, they were also more likely to survive. They also found that terrorist groups that reside in the Middle East and North Africa are more likely to survive than those in other regions of the world. Being located in democracy enhanced the chances of survival, as well as being located in an area with a larger percentage of jungle habitat, which, that makes sense. It's easier to hide in the jungle than not in the jungle. They also found those that were in landlocked countries were less likely to survive than those that had access to international waters. Finally, they found something that was really interesting, in that looking at groups post 1990, since 1997, that more transnational attacks hastens a group demise. So these are interesting findings and certainly hold some policy implications that the authors discuss in the later part of the article. Something interesting is that other authors have found a much higher percentage of groups that do not survive into year 2. Some, such as Rappaport, has suggested that as many as 90% of all terrorist groups don't make it to year 2. However, if groups do make it, it's important to address them early before they grow to a larger size, because the bigger they are, it makes it more likely that the group will end. Because as the group gets bigger, they develop more organizational capacity to commit attacks and acts of violence. The next article I'm going to discuss is by Cronin. This is one of the earliest works on causes of terrorist group demise. There's a lot of information in this article. And instead of conducting statistical analysis, Cronin takes more of a case study approach and highlights various factors that have been determined to cause the demise of terrorist groups. She reports that capturing or killing the leader, unsuccessfully transitioning to the next generation, achieving whatever cause they were working for, transition to legitimate political process or negotiations, losing popular support, being repressed, or transitioning out of terrorism into other forms of criminality, or to full insurgency. So I'm not going to discuss all of those because that's way more than the video of this length can handle. But make sure you check all those out, as you're reading the article. One of her interesting discussions is on the killing or capturing of the leader. And the article by Johnston that I'll discuss later focuses on this particular topic. The capturing or killing of a leader may lead the group to end, but it also may have the opposite effect. Actually create a martyr out of the leader that actually benefits the organization and can lead to increased activity. Arresting might be a better option, but only in some cases. So then she relates all those kind of back to Al-Qaeda. The third article for this week is the one that's mentioned by Johnston. He focuses on whether or not removing the leader is an effective counterterrorism strategy. Now, if you listen to the news and everything, taking out the leader is always what everybody wants to do. So Johnston, he examined 119 attempts at removing the leader, and around 40% of those were successful. So roughly, what's 40%? 45-ish of those attempts out of 119 were successful. He found that the removal of the leader did increase the government's chances of defeating insurgencies, reducing attacks, and diminishing overall levels of violence, but only at about a rate of 25 to 30%. So it's not a surefire way to end the group or to end the campaign. He also found no evidence of a martyrdom effect, where attempting to kill or otherwise neutralizing a leader decreases the chance of a government stopping the insurgency. So what he found is that even if a leader is killed, they become a martyr, that doesn't necessarily mean that the government can't stop the insurgency. All right, so the final article this week is actually one of mine that I've had published. This has resulted from my dissertation research from when I was working on my PhD. So I examined whether participation in violence by domestic far-right groups impacted their group longevity. So I examined whether a variety of external or internal characteristics impacted group longevity differently for violent groups versus nonviolent groups. So we didn't find a direct relationship between group participation in violence and a shortened lifespan, but we did find that violent groups were more likely to be influenced by external factors such as interacting with the police and being located in a red state, which is a state that supported Republicans for president between 1990 and 2008. We also found nonviolent groups were more likely to end because of internal characteristics such as factional splitting. So this is really interesting because it suggests that violent groups are more readily interacting with their outside environments than nonviolent groups. So then to go back to the original finding that there wasn't a relationship between a direct relationship between participating in violence and group longevity, then it makes you wonder why don't all extremist groups then participate in violence? Just something to think about. All right, so that's a quick summary of the 4 readings for this week. Be sure to read the articles in their entirety. There's a lot of good information in them that couldn't be covered in this video because it would have made it way, way, way too long. Make sure you complete all the assignments for this week, and let me know if you have any questions. I'll see you next week.